Now that we have Maven failsafe plugin configured, let's go ahead and basically set up our folder structure in order to write integration tests. So in here, what we want to do is basically have a folder where we can have a bunch of integration tests. So in our case, we have one repository that we want to basically have an integration test for. So let's go ahead, and in here, we're going to create a new package inside of com.example.demo. And here, I'm going to name this as into, and then integration, and then tests. Or you can just say integration because this is already test. So enter. And now let's create a new class. So here, I'm going to say control and then enter, new class. And then here, I'm going to say student and then IT. Now, IT means integration test. And this is what the Maven failsafe plugin will look for. It will look for any of these classes ending in anything.it, and then it will treat it as an integration test. So enter, and there we go. It's as simple as that. Now in here, the annotation that we need in order to make this class as an integration test with Spring Boot so that the application starts up and then we can actually fire some requests to our repository is the following. So here we're going to say add and then Spring Boot test, and you've seen this before, right? So here, so let me just go and basically I'm going to create an empty test. So control enter and then test method, and for now I'm just going to say name. So this is, we're going to change this in a second, but what I want you to do is to go and basically run this test. And what I want you to see is what's going to happen. So have a look. So you can see that the application is actually trying to start up and we have some errors, right? So basically it's trying to use H2 to our as its database, and basically it's trying to find this log file error. So what I want to do here, in fact, is with our integration tests, we want to make sure that the integration runs against a database that we're going to run when we deploy to real users. So in our case, it's Postgres. So what we're going to do is the following. I'm going to grab this application.properties. So in here, if I click on it, you see that it has URL, localhost 5432, and this is Postgres, right? So what I want to do is I want to basically grab this and then put it inside of resources, and then I'm going to name it as dash and then IT, and then OK, and then go back to my test, so student IT test, and then here I'm going to say add and then test property source, and inside I want to say locations, and here I'm going to say class path column, and then if I press control space, you see that we have auto completion, and I can choose application-IT. So this in fact will use this configuration right here instead of the application.properties, which is the one that connects to H2 database for unit tests. So now let's try and run this, and I want to show you step by step what happens. So we're gonna have another issue. So just give it a second, and there we go. So we have another issue, and right now it says that basically class path resource cannot be open, does not exist. So if you see an error like this, so just go to Maven, and we know for a fact that it does exist, right? So we know that we have application dash and then IT and then .properties. So go to Maven and then say clean. In here, we're going to clean the project. If this happens to you, by the way. Now that's done. So let me try and run the application again, or the test again. There we go. seems better now, but we still have an error. And the next error is driver org claims not to accept, and then JDBC. So basically what it's trying to do is it's trying to use the configuration from application.properties, and then application-it will override the ones that it finds in application.properties. So if I open up application.properties, you can see that we have this. So basically this org.h2 driver, which we are missing. So let's actually copy that. So we are missing in here application-it, and basically, so here, let's just paste that. And here, this will be org and then dot and then PostgreSQL and then dot driver. And in fact, it's good practice to take this also and put it inside of our application.properties. So let's put it here. So there we go. And also inside of our dev one. So there we go. So you can see the power of having tests. So just finding little issues that we didn't catch before. So now if I open up the application-it properties, so you can see that we have the org.PostgreSQL driver. So this is just defining the data source driver. And now let's try and run the test again. So I'm going to collapse this. So let's run this. And there we go. So if this does not work for you, it's because you don't have the database up and running. So if I open up my terminal, and then here, if I do a docker ps, you can see that I do have the database up and running, right? So this is our Docker container. And remember, the command to run the database is docker run, and then you specify the name, the port, the network, and then pwd for mounting the volume, the password, so on and so forth. And you can grab this command from the description of this video. So there you have it. So we actually have the class called student IT, and make sure IT right here, it's really important, and I'm going to show you why in a second, but make sure you name this as IT. So now what I want to do is, so open up Maven. And then in here, I'm going to untick build front end. I don't want this to run, this profile. And then I'm going to install. So you should see in a second that, so you can see that it's running the tests, and it's actually running unit tests. There we go. Now he's running the second set of tests, and that is the IT, so student IT, that's the integration test, and it worked. And if I scroll up, you can see that we have tests run, and basically it's actually running. So here, have a look, running, and then the name of our test, student IT. And let me just scroll here and see whether we have, there we go, not that, but basically you can see that Maven failsafe plugin did run, right? So if I scroll up just for a second, you can see that the unit tests, so we had 8 tests, they're all passed, which is really nice. And then it did run the integration test. So have a look, Maven failsafe plugin, and then integration test. And this is really cool. You can see that now when we push to GitHub, we will both run the unit tests as well as integration tests. So we have everything set up, and now all we have to do is just write a integration test that will test that when we invoke the API in it does work. If you have any questions on what we've done in this video, but this was mainly a setup, and it should be really straightforward, please do let me know. Otherwise, let's move on.